So what I'm going to do is just real quick recall what we talked about last week, and it was that in the base of the stomach is the caloric valve, and in the presence of protein, this will close. I found out later that if that food is more fatty than just protein, very fatty food, it'll close even more. So you can block it 80% with protein, you can block 100% with more fatty foods. So all that does is that gives your body time to be able to eliminate it just by breathing, by talking, any loss of moisture from your body, perspiration, urination, you're going to be eliminating some of that alcohol. So, Trina, if you can jump to
Sorry. Following is the book. I think I got
34.
page 40.
Okay. Okay, I provided you with the poster. And the reason it's not in the book is the book was finished before I thought this up. I thought it was a good idea once I started talking to people about the adverse effects to be able to document it where they could actually see it. Then I went a step further and created the nutritional solutions. So the rectangles that you see there are the adverse effects of alcohol. The bubbles are the nutritional solutions for each one of those adverse effects. Last week, we started with blood alcohol concentration on how to control that. This week, we're going to finish up on that segment by going to malabsorption and dehydration. These all fall into a common thread of either blocking or losing nutrients in your body. So malabsorption is a concept where the excess of alcohol consumption prevents the uptake of nutrients in the diet. And this is activity that's really begins in the liver. This is one of Dr. Lieber's very first discoveries. He discovered this back in the 60s. And to give you an idea, I'll give you an idea of how far advanced he was in a lot of his research. It occurs when the body fails to take up nutrients that are in the diet. Before Lieber discovered this concept of malabsorption, the medical community thought that malnutrition was causing alcoholism. And they thought that because, well, every alcoholic is malnourished, so it's the malnutrition that's causing the alcoholism. And Lieber, being a gastroenterologist, he says it's just the opposite. It's the alcohol that's causing the malnutrition. And he went on to prove it. And just think about that for a minute. Think about how difficult it might be for somebody in science to come up with a concept that was just the opposite of what everybody else thought was true. Going back to the beginning of the universe, you got Columbus seeing these big sails come out of the water, and where they thought that the Earth was flat, and it's not flat, it's curved. And then you had Copernicus thought that the Earth was the center of the galaxy, and then Galileo came along and says, no, it's the sun. So you have a lot of these situations in science where they think one thing in the beginning and just the opposite is true. So, and Lieber became a gastroenterologist for a very sincere reason. He had stomach problems as a teenager. And you'll see that in medicine, that many of the doctors that go into medicine will go into the specialty that they're themselves are suffering from. So, and Lieber lived a full life. He died in his 70s, but he died of stomach cancer. And next week I'll tell you about another doctor that same situation's happened to when we talk about toxicity. So, because of his training, and Trina, can you get up to 35? Slide 30. Okay. Because of his training as gastroenterologist, he recognized there was a second form of alcohol metabolism. Go to 36, please. These are the two forms of alcohol metabolism. The one on the left is called the Tumakase flowchart, and named after the two scientists that were able to develop that. Slide over to the right, Trina. The other one is called MEOS, a very scientific name, and to keep Doug happy, I'm not even going to mention it, but it's just called MEOS. But this is when the difference between the two is when you're drinking, where is your blood alcohol concentration when you start? The Tumakase chart starts at 0. You begin drinking, you'll have a few drinks, afterwards you stop, go to bed, next day you might feel fine, you might not. MEOS is a situation where that blood alcohol concentration never gets back to 0. You go to bed intoxicated, you wake up intoxicated, and you repeat that same abusive drinking of alcohol. Everyone, let me explain some of these charts here. Everywhere you see a branch, these be closer to this. Here, I think you might have a bad battery.
Yeah.
It's too small. Yeah.
To the bottom.
Okay, thank you. Okay, everywhere you see a branch here is where alcohol is interacting with an enzyme. Here, right there, okay,
For you too.
and then up there, good, thank you. And then up here, you have another interaction with enzymes, and every time that happens, there's a change, and then there's byproducts that come off of it. Aldehyde is a toxin. This is what Lieber called highly toxic poison. And these over here are oxygen radicals. When I found this chart, this was, and not knowing a lot of the science and breakdown of alcohol, when I saw this chart, I knew this was the smoking gun that I was looking for when I was asking the question years before, does alcohol cause cancer? And you don't have to be a scientist to know that oxygen radicals, hydroethyl radicals, that's all, they're free radicals. Free radicals will mutate your cells and begin the process of a tumor. Over on the other side, if you can slide it over there, Trina. On the severe side, where this keeps happening for day after day after day after day, you see these wheels. They remind me of hamster wheels. It's like you're trying to bail out a boat that's got a hole in it without fixing the hole. You're not going to get anywhere. Alcohol comes into the body over here. Ethanol, that's the scientific, there we go. And then ADH is the alcohol enzyme that breaks it down to aldehyde. And then it goes on, and everywhere you see these circles, this is oxidation. And in this case, it's massive oxidation, where the Tumakase chart is on the mild side, you're still creating free radicals within your system. This is very severe. And again, it just keeps going on and on and on. So this puts in a tremendous amount of burden on the body. And because the liver is active in this and trying to remove this, you can have a plate of nutritious food, and that person can eat it, and it's just not going to make an effect. If your liver could talk to you, it says, you know, you're wasting your time, I'm busy trying to get rid of the alcohol. And it'll put every other metabolic process on hold until that happens. All right, let me see where we are there.
Does that mean that after you have alcohol, that, if you have a nutritious meal afterwards, it doesn't do anything?
These are, if we're dealing with just the breakdown of the Tuma-Casey flow chart, where you started at baseline of 0, yeah, you're going to be able to break down the nutrients. That meal is going to have an impact on you.
So you're basically talking about an alcoholic is not going to get the same nutrition from that meal.
So, yeah, so where you have somebody that hasn't been eating, they're on a liquid diet, this kicks in, and you can present them with the most nutritious meal, and there is no effect. And this was one of the major discoveries that Lieber made. To give you an idea how far ahead he was in this, he discovered this in the 60s. And in 2000, there was a health alert that went out from the healthcare people saying that if you are on statin medications, don't eat grapefruit. Does anybody remember that?
Yes.
I've heard it.
Okay. The reason for that is that there is an enzyme in the grapefruit that prevented the uptake of the active ingredients in Lipitor or Plavix or whatever your statin medication was. And after all those years of prescribing these medicines, doctors did not know that if people were eating grapefruit, they weren't going to uptake the active ingredients. So in essence, it was a placebo.
So you can eat grapefruit? If
I'm
you're,
not-
if you're on blood pressure,
If you're on statin medications, you want to consult your doctor about that, because now they know about it. But before this study was released, 2000, it wasn't. I'll give you a little story. First time I told this, this aldehyde is in a family of chemicals that includes formaldehyde. You're familiar with formaldehyde? That's an embalming fluid. The very first time I spoke of it in that way was to my delegate down in Florida. I was trying to get his assistance in getting this information into the legislature, because all across the nation, legislators will come up with laws to regulate alcohol, but they really don't know a lot of stuff. The NIAAA doesn't send this out to the different state capitals for delegates and senators to educate themselves. So when I told him that aldehyde was part of the formaldehyde, his ears picked up, because his day job was a funeral director. So he knew very well what formaldehyde was. And then when I told him the story about the grapefruit, his eyes opened up again, because a lot of his constituents were citrus growers. And he saw what happened to them economically when the study was released that don't eat grapefruit. It just killed the grapefruit industry. Okay, Katrina, go to the next one, please. So I just want to give you a little bit of information about Charles Lieber. This guy I equate him to Nikola Tesla. If you've ever heard about any of the discoveries that Tesla came up with, Charles Lieber is a close second. During a 10-year period in the height of his career, his papers were the most cited on PubMed. PubMed's publication of all the science studies that it's um, organized by the National Institute of Health. And one of his discoveries in the early years was that there was a bacteria in the stomach. And again, it went counter to what the medical profession thought was true, that bacteria wouldn't survive stomach acids, that there were no bacteria in the stomach. And it's called H. pylori. Several years later, two scientists took up that same research and they discovered that H. pylori, the bacterium in the stomach, was responsible for ulcers and cancers. And they won the 2005 Nobel Prize for Medicine that year. So the guy was just so far ahead of his time, he needed time for other people to catch up to him. Trina, go to 38. Go back one more. Go back one more. I still need to talk a little bit about Lieber. He had a very Lieber was just so far ahead of his time. He had this what I call an intellectual side, but there's also a very ethical and humanitarian side to him. There became a time when the NIAAA and Mount Sinai School of Medicine were being approached by the drug industry to use pharmaceuticals in the treatment of alcoholics. And Lieber was opposed to that for the main reason that his patients at the VA hospital, where he was a practicing physician, already had compromised livers. They would not be able to metabolize the different pharmaceuticals, whatever they were, because that constant trying to break down the alcohol under severe situations, the Neos form, just wasn't happening. So they parted ways. He left his position at Mount Sinai as a teaching professor and as a researcher, and he started just dealing with the VA hospital patients. And I got a lot of this from his wife. I started all this in 2009. And when I started it, I wrote a letter, and I sent it to Mount Sinai, thinking that's where he was working. And by the time Vic got there, he was already gone. But beyond that, a few months later, he passed away. And I was able to still follow his work. And when I looked at some of the studies that he was responsible for, I saw another name in the authors that wrote these studies. The name was M. Lieber. Well, it was his wife, his second wife. And she was involved in a lot of the research that he's done. And I wound up getting in touch with her and spoke to her on the phone. Unfortunately, her accent was very Italian. She grew up in Milan, Italy, and but what she told me, and when I asked her the question, I said, "Why did he leave the Mount Sinai?" She's the one that told me the story about the pharmaceutical companies. So when you compare him to, say, Anthony Fauci, here Lieber was refused to accept government money for the funding, where Fauci not only accepted it, but he was receiving a lot of royalties for some of the stuff that they were producing. So here's another story that can maybe give you an idea of the frail status of the liver at times. When my wife and I moved down to Ocean Pines, my next door neighbor had a second home. This was his second home. They lived in Montgomery County. And Matt was older than I was. We didn't have a whole lot in common. We'd say hi. We saw each other out on the street. But But when he cut his grass, he always wore a mask. This was back way before COVID, where masks were in vogue. And I came to find out that he had a lung transplant. And after 5 years of rehabilitation, he suddenly died. So when I caught up with his wife, Catherine, afterwards, Catherine, what happened? She said his liver failed. He was taking over 30 prescriptions to get the organ to be accepted by the body. I mean, somewhere along the line, the doctor should be communicating that, hey, if he's taking this, he shouldn't be taking that. It just didn't happen. When you look back at what the NIAAA has done in now it's 50 years, they have studied alcohol to the nth degree. Alcohol is a drug. And one of the things they didn't, the health officials didn't do, they didn't check have you heard of the drug Avandia and Wellbridger? There was a lot of Plavix, I think it was one of them. There was a lot of pharmaceuticals that got out into the marketplace that were harmful, and they had to be recalled. But here, we've analyzed alcohol for over 50 years, and they haven't been doing the same thing for some of these other pharmaceuticals that get into the marketplace. And I think that's probably one of the things that Kennedy's going to be working on, is trying to change that. Let's go on to 38. Oops. 30. There we go. Okay, this is a nutritional solution for malabsorption, is vitamin A. And again, Lieber went to the dietitians and nutritionists at Mount Sinai School of Medicine and worked with them on a solution. This is probably one of the most challenging nutritional solutions for him to come up with. But they discovered that vitamin A in the form of, well, you can get it from sweet potatoes. These are from the Department of Agriculture. These are foods that are rich in vitamin A. Sweet potatoes, carrots, squash. Squash, I found out, was a fruit, not a vegetable. I didn't know that. But everybody's favorite meat down there is liver. Actually, I used to eat a lot of liver when I was a kid. We used to have it every Tuesday. Hated it in the beginning. I learned to love it afterwards. Next slide, Trina. In 2004, Lieber wrote an article titled Relationship Between Nutrition, Alcohol Use, and Liver Disease. And here he identified that there were 6 causes for nutrient deficiencies. 3 of them were inadequacies, like not eating the right foods, nutrients not present in the diet, or cooked out, or food that was out of date, and then bad metabolism. The 3 excesses was increased need, but not in the diet, increased breakdown or blockage, like malabsorption, and increased loss due to either vomiting or diarrhea, where the body just violently rejects whatever you're trying to give it. Abusive alcohol consumption produces all 6. Next slide. Better view of some of these tables are in the book. I tried to recreate them here, but you see some of the same foods provide different vitamins and minerals. There's 2 main categories of vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins are stored in the body, don't need to replace them on a daily basis. Water-soluble vitamins are stored in small amounts and do need to be replenished. One of the things that gets me in this age of the internet, there's a lot of stories that you'll see posted where an interviewer will talk to a nutritionist, and then the nutrition will say something like, don't drink orange juice in the morning. It'll spike your blood sugars. And typically these are like teaser type of phrases that get you to click on to the article. Um, but I eat 4 different kinds of berries during the day that contain chlorogenic and caffeic acids. And these fruits, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, will help moderate the blood sugars. I drink orange juice in the morning for the vitamin C. It's a natural form of vitamin C as opposed to taking a pill. You can mitigate some of the other problems with other foods. So I never stop taking orange juice. I've just had 4 ounces. It's not a lot to spike it up. If I drink it 12 ounces, probably yes. But
Well, it doesn't depend, I mean, if you drink orange juice with food, that's going to counteract that spike. It's just if you just drink orange juice, then
well, yeah, I don't drink it.
that's what they leave out. They don't say,
Yeah,
make sure
right.
you have a bowl of oatmeal while you're drinking.
But we'll get, and next week we'll start talking about insulin and these chlorogenic acids, caffeic acids that are in certain foods will help to moderate the blood sugars and make the insulin that you produce more accessible by the cells. So, but the important thing is, and one of the things with orange juice, I think orange juice is healthier in the pulp form as opposed to the clear. I remember the Juice Man. If you remember some of the commercials back in the Juice Man, all the nutrients were in the pulp and the peels and skins of the fruits. So, and one of the important things is you try to get the foods from as close to source as possible. There's a lot of stuff that gets into the grocery stores that come out of Chile. And just the travel, bringing that stuff thousands of miles just causes it to start deteriorating a little bit quicker. Next slide. These are micro minerals that are should be in the diet. Calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium are probably the more important ones. The body needs these in large quantities, and it's best to get these from the diet. Next slide. On the left side, you have some trace minerals. Copper, chromium, you can see them there. These are minerals that you should get in your diet. If you've listened to television and seen the commercials with Elmer Heinrich with Immuno 150, I take that supplement. I think it helps supplement some of the things I don't get from the diet. They're just not present in the foods that are in the marketplace. There's another source on the right-hand side are the 3 electrolytes. We're going to be talking about them in detail in a little while. Potassium, sodium, and chloride. There are 2 beverages that can provide some of these. One is mineral waters. Water, you probably remember back in the 80s or before, grocery stores didn't sell bottled water. If they had any kind of water that was bottled, or probably distilled water, then the problems with chlorine and municipal tap water became apparent, and people started putting filters on their kitchen sinks to be able to filter out some of the chlorine that was in the water. That's when the bottled water industry exploded in the United States. It was around that time I could see that was happening. I actually took some water chemistry classes just to get a better understanding on the chemistry behind water and water filtration. Another source of another beverage where you can get some of these minerals is from wine. There's a lot of wines that are grown in mountainous areas, rocky soils, that when rain comes down, many of those minerals go into the earth, and the vines, the vine's roots will bring it up into the grape. So you'll have, you notice it more in white wines than you do in red, where there's a minerality to the wine that gives the wine just a taste that just makes it different. It's really delightful when you have a good one. And again, you typically find these in mountain-grown areas where the vineyards are high up in the mountains. Next slide, Tree. Okay. I think you got one of the place. No, you don't. Okay. I'm right, you're wrong. That was the end of the nutritional part of malabsorption. Any questions before I move on to dehydration?
Just very briefly, I have a daughter who won't even drink Fresca or grapefruit flavored, seltzer water because she has high blood pressure and is on statins.
Really?
Is she wrong? Because she said it's just flavored, but it's still the same thing.
Well,
For high blood pressure, statin drugs are for cholesterol.
yeah, but
Well, no, I thought she said that she's not supposed to take it because of her high blood pressure.
well, statin medications will be prescribed for people that have or at risk of high blood pressure. So it's controlling the cholesterol that's in the system. But to get to your question, I would doubt very seriously if Fresca or any other have natural fruit juices in them. They're typically chemically a lab-produced flavor. You'd be amazed at how much. When I had a store out in Owings Mills on Ricerstown Road, and down the road from us was a spice company. It wasn't McCormick's, it was Baltimore Spice, I believe it was. But one of the things they did is they made flavorings for the food industry. It had probably little to do with the actual fruit that they're trying to mimic.
That's what I.
But I would dare say, I mean, she was probably being overly cautious, but sometimes that's good. I don't think Fresca is going to be one of those high on the
Danger list.
Yeah.
So GI bleeds or ulcers are related to malabsorption.
I'm sorry.
GI bleeds or ulcers are related.
I would imagine, it's getting a little bit out of my field, but malabsorption is just. I'm sure there's a lot of other pharmaceuticals that in combination can cause that.
But what if someone doesn't take that? Any meds and things?
Right. Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of different pharmaceuticals that have chemicals in it that will have an effect where a certain food or group of foods wouldn't be efficacious if you eat them. You're not going to get any benefit from it. But again, it's a little bit, it doesn't have to do with alcohol. I'm moving on to the next subject. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it seems bottled water kind of started with the spa industry, places in Europe have the bottle.
It did. It did.
My parents retired in Hot Springs, Arkansas. They had 2 fountains downtown. People would take their gallon milk jugs. I mean, the water's still warm when it comes out. Carry it down, take 10-gallon milk jug.
Oh, there's places actually, I grew up in Baltimore. So there was like some springs that people would bring their jugs and fill them up in the springs. It was right there. I lived across the street from Heron Park. And when you went up a couple miles up the park, there was this, when they built a rock grotto around this thing, and they had different spigots, and you had to wait in line sometimes to fill your jugs. But yeah, there's some good water that comes out of the earth, and a lot of this water chemistry classes that I had enlightened me to a lot of that. Over here on the Eastern Shore, you have a problem with shallow aquifers. And many of the fields that you see out there with their irrigation systems, if they're tapping into the shallow aquifer, many of them have a lot of contaminants in it. And during that time, I was trained to take samples for the EPA, where people that were buying a property, they had to have their well examined for drinkable water. And many times, if they were in the wrong aquifer, they had to come in and dig deeper. Kent Island, the original houses there were into an aquifer that was only 25 feet down. It's called the Ikea. And down below that was another aquifer called the Magathie. The Magathie, what happened with the Ikea is the salt water from the bay started intruding into the aquifer. So a lot of the water, when they started testing it, they were coming up with a sodium content that was becoming alarming. And the county said, you can't use that anymore. You got to drill your well down into the Magathie. And that was problematic because the Magathie had more iron in it. So only people that have beautiful bathrooms with their nice soaking tubs, you fill it up with water without turning your tub around. So, okay, any other questions before we move on? We can do the same thing at the end if you have any other questions. But let's talk about dehydration. Remember when we were talking about blood alcohol concentration, there has to be, or there is, a very large amount of water in your blood system. Your blood plasma is, as an organ, has the second largest volume of water other than your cells. We talked about the blood alcohol concentration in the beginning as being that relationship between the amount of water in your body and the amount of alcohol that was getting into your bloodstream. With dehydration, the nutritional solution is water, but a better one would be electrolytes. The source of a lot of this information that you're going to see in this slide is really from outside the NIAAA. Some of it came from the Gatorade Sports Medicine Institute. 2 chapters of nutrition, total nutrition, one on water and other fluids, and another on the nutritional needs of athletes. And then from Culligan International, that was the chemistry, water chemistry classes that I attended. Dehydration is directly connected with the blood alcohol concentration because it's such a large portion of blood plasma. Blood plasma has over 90% water and second highest concentration in the body. Less water in the bloodstream means that your blood alcohol concentration levels are going to be higher. The more water in the blood, the more diluted the alcohol in the bloodstream becomes, and you'll get lower readings from that. That's pretty much just makes common sense. Alcohol will dehydrate the body 4 ways. First, it's a drying agent. Best way to imagine this is with rubbing alcohol. If you put it on your skin, you'll notice that that area of your skin will be drier once the evaporation takes place. Alcohol evaporates rapidly, and it takes moisture with it when it goes. Alcohol or dehydration alcohol is also a diuretic. So when you're consuming alcohol, you're going to experience more urination. And also you lose fluids due to alcohol by the rejection of fluids and foods in your diet. You're either going to vomit them or you're going to have diarrhea. Either way, you're losing a massive amount of fluids. So all these represent the loss of fluids, and the best way to do it is to keep hydrated. Go to 44, Trina. So I'm going to get away from alcohol industry for a minute because this, when I became a retailer, one of the things that I realized is this is when there was a big change within consumables that dealt with beverages because the soda industry was growing rapidly. And I've always thought that the alcohol beverage industry was part of a bigger picture where carbonated soft drinks, that CDS is an abbreviation for carbonated soft drinks, that the FDA gave to Cokes, sodas of different types. But there's a bigger picture. The entire industry is part of food and beverage. And when I bought my store in 1982, Coca-Cola approached us about doing the grand opening. They would give us the opportunity to one time buy a truckload, that's 1,000 cases, at a very, very special low price. So we took them up on it. This is back in a time when carbonated soft drinks were undergoing a lot of change, mainly due to the fact that the artificial sweetener was changing. Sugar was deemed to be evil, and they were trying to force the government was trying to force the soda industry into finding something else as a substitute. Going back in time, cyclamates were one of the first artificial sweeteners, and up until 1970. The cyclamates were banned by the FDA because they discovered it was causing cancer in lab rats. The next artificial sweetener they attached themselves to was saccharin. Saccharin was the main sweetener in Tab. Remember Tab way back when. One of the problems with Tab, it had a chemical taste to it. And a lot of people attributed it to the tin cans, but it was the ingredient itself had a chemical taste. The FDA came along and claimed that it was a carcinogen. There were some problems. It started in Canada, carried on into California. And in 1977, they petitioned that the industry move on to something else. But in 1991, they came back and they said, well, there's nothing wrong with cyclamates, but it was too late. The industry was already on to aspartame. And the brand name that you see that under most commonly is NutraSweet. But then they discovered that aspartame is an excitotoxin. And an excitotoxin is a chemical that will cause neurons in your head, in your brain, to be excited. And there was a movement afoot to remove that from the marketplace, but the FDA refused to do it. They said it was safe, and it stayed in the marketplace. The ingredients in aspartame was also glutamate, which is an amino acid, and glycine. There was a time back in the 80s when they discovered that monosodium glutamate was causing health problems with people. And the industry, the food industry, agreed to remove it as an ingredient. But all they did was they went and reformulated that same flavor profile and recreated it under a different name. And on the water side, if you can remember back, we were drinking tap water up into the 80s. And that's when some of the studies started coming out that chlorine was carcinogenic. That's when the European brands started to make headway in the United States. Long before the U.S. bottlers got into it. You had Perrier, Evian, and San Pellegrino in the U.S. market. Then in the 90s, late 90s is when the U.S. companies came out with Aquafina and Desante. I got to introduce you to Russell Blaylock. This is one of the favorite books that I have in my library. And I bought this thing long before I got involved with alcohol education. Russell Blaylock wrote a book called Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills, where he claimed that the excitotoxins cause degenerative diseases like dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's disease. And he was able to document that a large source of the excitotoxins were in the brand name product of aspartame under the NutraSweet label. And these got into our foods either directly or indirectly. So a lot of what Robert Kennedy is going to be investigating. I feel that there was a correlation between that autism. And I started doing some research that I was going to present today. But as I got into some of the new stuff, it really has gotten advanced. So I'm going to hold that off to next week. We'll devote a segment to it because I think it's so important. In Europe, there was a correlation in the United States where I could see that the rise in artificial sweeteners in sodas and the popularity correlated with a rise in autism in the United States. And it didn't fall back until the 90s when Waters was replacing diet sodas for mothers-to-be. The same reverse situation happened in Europe. Bottled waters were already popular there. And they were popular because their water systems, their filtration systems were terrible. One of the reasons Europeans drink a lot of wine. They didn't have a good water source. So the bottled waters were very popular there. And their autism rates were low until the U.S. soda industry started introducing diet sodas over in Europe. And you had this uptake. So, but we'll deal with that a little bit more. I'll have some documentation. All right, I think we exhausted that one. Here we go. Here's a picture of total dehydration, massive dehydration. Back when I was 17, I played on a soccer team that we played for a national championship in the under 19 age group. We have a team from St. Louis come over to Baltimore and to play the game. And a soccer season typically begins in the fall. When you get up to this level, it doesn't start until school ball ends. So it's typically in November when the season begins. And it typically ends somewhere around December and January. But then you got cup play that extends the season. And we had a good team. We kept advancing. But we didn't play the championship until July in 90-degree weather, 90-degree humidity. And the science of hydration just wasn't born yet. So this was right around the time that Gatorade was first being formulated. But what it does, it causes a lack of or a loss of mental focus and muscle function, mainly through cramping. Next slide. Okay, this is the amount of water in the human body over the course of a lifetime. What always amazes me is that the fetus in the womb is 100% water, and at birth it goes to 80%. A normal adult will have anywhere from 75 to 70% hydration in the body, but in senior years it drops off dramatically, so down to about 50%. And that becomes problematic if you're not addressing the fluid needs of your body, and mainly is
But the bent over person, it's not because of 50% of water, it's then because of bone loss.
Mostly, but, yeah, a lot of it, just a lot of the organs in the body depend on moisture to be able to function properly. Your brain is one of them. You just need a lot of hydration with the proper amount of electrolytes, sodium, potassium. We'll deal with that a little later in this class. But that's what happens during the lifespan. Is very quickly it goes from can go from 80% to 50% in a few decades. Next slide. Okay, where in the body is all the water? This will be a slide kind of lost a little bit of the side there. The normal body will have about 70%. And then in the blood plasma, it can be as much as 85, 90%. The brain, 80% hydration, and muscles as well. That's one of the reasons why there's blood alcohol concentration charts had a different number for women than it did for men. Because men typically will have more muscle mass, and that is the big difference there. And then the cells, the trillions and trillions of cells in your body, between those cells is 90% water. Next slide. And one of the things that I didn't mention there on that last slide was the other components of the body, the skeleton, the bones, and your fat. And a lot of people aren't aware of this. I wasn't when I first learned it, is that the extra body fat that we carry is actually dry, or as dry as bone. So there's the more weight that you're carrying, the more excess weight that you're carrying, the drier your body's going to be. Okay, let me tell you about the story of Gatorade. It was the subject of a commercial a couple of years back where they had Keith Jackson doing narration of the story of Gatorade. It began back in the 1960s down in Florida, where one of the football coaches, they begin their football seasons in the spring. Have you ever been to Florida during the summertime? It's just brutally hot. He noticed, one of the coaches noticed that the low intensity of his players during the spring practices. So he took this observation to the team trainer, and he took the matter to Dr. Cade. Dr. Cade was a researcher in nutrition on campus. So he analyzed some of the players, and he discovered that there was a big drop in the electrolytes in the body. So he formulated a drink that is known as Gatorade. It's named after the Florida Gator mascot. There are four main electrolytes that you need in your body: potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium. In a short while, when we get into the next section of cell development, I'll talk about the importance of these. When my son became, was about 5 years old, we were living in Ellicott City. He wanted to start playing soccer. So we had joined the Soccer Association in Columbia. They were affiliated with the national group, the United States Soccer Federation. The USSF was trying to educate coaches to be able to teach the sport on a higher level. So they adopted a coaching program from the Germans. The Germans were the World Cup winners at that time. One of the pillars of knowledge that they talked about in this class had to do with physiology, how you could play a 90-minute match and run 12 miles and still be a high performer at the end of the game. If you watch any kind of sports, that you know that a lot of the competitions will be decided in the final minutes, seconds of the game. Gatorade Sports Science Institute was a major contributor to the coaching class that I took. The director is a guy named Bob Murray. And I communicated with him when I was writing the book, got his permission to use some of their material. He writes that water is not the best hydrator. Water shuts off the thirst before total rehydration takes place. And he writes in the book, and many athletes rely on thirst alone to stimulate them to drink, but thirst is an inaccurate gauge of the fluid needs when you're physically active. Thirst is driven by two physiological changes: a rise in concentration of sodium levels and a drop of blood volume. Whenever you sweat, part of the sweat comes from the blood. Since we lose more water molecules than electrolytes from the blood, the plasma sodium concentration or the saltiness of the blood rises. That stimulates thirst. But when you drink plain water with no electrolytes, that plasma sodium concentration will fall, reducing your need, the thirst that you have, and you're not totally rehydrated. So if that drink doesn't have sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium in it, your total hydration is not going to be as great. And you need all those for that muscle function, or else you're going to have cramps. Okay, I think we finished week 1. Is there any questions about any of that? Go ahead, Bill.
Where does salt come in?
Salt.
What time they give you salt tablets?
At one time they used to, then they stopped. I remember taking them when I was in high school. We used to start our practices in the summer for the soccer season in high school. And they used to give us salt tablets, and then the practice stopped. I don't think it was as effective because that sodium is just one component. You know, there's three other electrolytes.
As a camp in the 60s when Gatorade came out, drank it with Gator fans, never thought really the hydration, but.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, any other
It
questions?
was named after them until him. I never thought about the name of Gatorade, like where it came from.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. I did a lot of research into it because it just kind of fit into the whole plan.
Makes sense. I can't imagine playing football or any sport.
Yeah, how about long in the summer down there?
Yeah, it is not a good place if you're a golfer. And most golfers are off the golf course by 12, 1 o'clock. It's just, you got to get out there. And I used to golf with a lot of elderly guys down there. And, you know, the first thing they do, they go inside the bar, give me a pitcher of beer. You know, so I'm like saying, you know, where's the food? Do you have any protein here? No, the kitchen's closed, but we got beer, you can have beer. So,
I have a quick question. Is
Go
there a
ahead.
difference between the European waters and the American waters? Like difference in mineral content?
you can have a difference in water, I found out, from Easton to St. Michael's.
Okay.
You know, depending on the aquifers where the source is coming from. But yes, you're going to have it. And a lot of those same minerals that get into wine, that's also getting into the water systems there as well. So a lot of people just, the amount of water on Earth is the same as when the Earth was created. It's the same. It's just in different forms. It's either in liquid, frozen, or vapor. And it just keeps recycling. It's what we call a water cycle. We drink it, we consume it, but now it becomes part of our body. And we wind up eventually donating it back to the universe by perspiration and dehydration. So when you start hearing about water problems that places have, it's not because there's no water. The water's there, it's just not in the spot they want it to be.
Or it's not accessible to people. And
Correct. So they're making discoveries now that down in the bowels of the earth, they're finding oceans of water down there that they say really doubles the amount of water that they thought was on Earth. It's amazing. So, but yeah, Europe is a little bit different culture. Even with pharmaceuticals, their healthcare system over there is so much far advanced than ours. It's amazing. Okay, if you take a look at the Leonardo da Vinci poster, the next two elements we're going to talk about are toxicity and oxidation. They're very, very closely related, and I separated them in the book, but I had to come back and combine them when I got finished those two chapters. We're dealing with cellular health now, and you do have to understand that when you talk about a cell in the body, there are trillions of them. Good cells beget good cells. Bad cells beget problems like tumors and genetic changes that cause different alterations in the body. And then if you go to next slide, we're going to be dealing mainly in middle and senior age because at this point in life, most of us began drinking in our teenage years. By the time we got into middle age at 30, 35, we were drinking already for about 20 years. So a lot of these effects started way back when. Next slide. Okay, the Surgeon General declared that alcohol is a carcinogen, and he was right, but this is not new information. What they discovered that the parts of the body that were most vulnerable to cancer with regard to alcohol was what they call the upper trachea. And it includes parts of the body like the mouth, the throat, the larynx, the esophagus, and even the breast. So the upper portion of the body was more vulnerable to cancer from alcohol than liver. And why would that be? What do you think that would attribute it to? I gave you a clue a little while ago when I started talking about how alcohol dehydrates the body. Alcohol will remove any moisture that comes in contact with. It evaporates fast, and it'll evaporate any moisture that comes in contact, like your skin. But when I got into the industry, the martini was a cocktail that was beginning to fade away. These were mainly, I call them business executives that had the 3 martini lunch, okay? And the industry started moving on from martinis to other mixed drinks, rum and coke, vodka and orange juice, things like that, where the cocktails were not as strong as a dry martini. Dry martini is nothing more than vodka or gin with a bottle of vermouth waved over top of it. It is typically 100% alcohol. And vodka was typically 80 proof. Gins the imported gins got into the 90s, 90, 94. So what is causing it today is the return of the martini. You just have a lot of mixologists out there that says, I got a killer martini. And they'll come up with a concoction, whether it's an appletini, a chocolatini, whatever it is. But many of them, that's their signature drink. So when you go to these different places, place down in Ocean City, they created the Orange Crush. The Orange Crush is now the official drink of the state of Maryland. Didn't know that? Yeah, the last legislative session.
What is Orange Crush?
It's a vodka-based drink with orange liqueurs that are in it. So anyway, so that's they're the problems that begin with alcohol consumption. It's the parts of the upper body are the ones that are going to be most affected. So how does cancer happen? We talked about it before about the alcohol being a drying agent. It'll remove moisture from everything that it touches. That includes the cells of your body and cells of the organs of your body, especially the extracellular fluids between cells and the cytoplasms, the spaces within the cells. And this is what causes the genetic damage. Next slide. So we're back to the Touma-Casey flow chart. We're dealing with this side of the flow chart where there's oxygen radicals. Actually, you could, as you see here, aldehyde is also created by this, and the hydroxyl radicals here. Then these break off into another one where you see lipid peroxidation. This is where the fats in your cardiovascular system are beginning to oxidize. And now you're on your way to more severe cardiovascular disease. If you were at risk before, this will start you on the way to that first stroke or heart attack. And again, this was the smoking gun that I found when that answered the question, does alcohol cause cancer?
Do you believe that these antioxidants work?
Oh, absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely. And
not just berries, but the medicine.
yeah, you're maybe.
Okay, forget I said anything.
Good question. So my first reaction when I saw this was, this is trouble. I just knew that these had something to do with free radicals, and free radicals as the beginning stages of breakdown in the cell and beginning of tumors. My second reaction was this, that if they could break down alcohol into these minute problems and deal with them, then why weren't they doing it with Avandia, Wellbutrin, Paxil, Lyrica? These were all pharmaceuticals that got out into the marketplace. They got approval from the Food and Drug Administration. Then years later, they had to pull back because they were harmful. So.
But those are antidepressants.
Well, they're just different. They're different types of. It has nothing to do with alcohol consumption. I'm just talking about the Food and Drug Administration as a whole. Never forced the pharmaceutical companies to document whether the product that they were prescribing was safe. That GRAS, G-R-A-S, generally recognized as safe. So it could be different pharmaceuticals and different for different ailments, but again, it's, if you're going to put something out, it's got to be something safe, and that's the whole thing that Kennedy's talking about. That a lot of these vaccines got approved without sufficient testing. Okay. So everywhere you see a branch, it's where the body is breaking this down, and you wind up with byproducts. Alcohol dehydrogenase, that's here, is one of the main enzymes that breaks down alcohol. And then there's another chromium P452E1 here that is an enzyme that causes a lot of this oxidation. All right, Trina, go to the next slide. And this is just where I tried to separate it for you in a, where toxicity is on the far left side of that flow chart and the oxidation is on the right side. Next slide. Okay, let's talk about a nutritional solution for toxins. This is a book that I bought, again, long before I started alcohol research. I became concerned about my health, my diet, and this was a book that was recommended that deals with how the body detoxifies itself. And it's an excellent book. It's written by Dr. Sherry Rogers. She is one of those doctors that got into a field of medicine because she had problems with her immune system. She lived on a farm in upstate New York, and one of her duties for the family was to drive the tractors that spread the chemicals out in the field. And you know from driving up and down farm country here that when you see that cloud of dust, you know that they're spreading something. And she wound up breathing in a lot of those dust particles, and it compromised her immune system. So when she became a doctor, her specialty is environmental medicine. She's so sensitive today to particulates, let's call them particulates, that her patients are not allowed to have perfume or cologne. Just the breathing of those. You have to understand that everything that gets into the body has to metabolize it in some form or fashion. The air we breathe goes into our lungs, and a lot of things happen from there. But the pollen that we breathe in, the viruses that we take in, go back to 5 years ago to COVID, the body's got to deal with these in some fashion. And then in severe cases, it just totally breaks down. So she decided to go into environmental medicine, and what she describes so accurately here is how detoxification takes place. It's a two-phase step. In phase one, try and explain this so I don't lose you. In phase one, the electrons on a cell will be shifted to prepare a niche for the antitoxin. The best way to describe it is with demo. This is acetaldehyde, the toxin from alcohol. This is glutathione. Glutathione is an antitoxin in your body that your body will make to eliminate toxins. And it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Acetaldehyde, and they bind together. This new molecule is heavy and winds up getting into your waste system, and you wind up flushing it away when you go. Problem is that you wind up losing 1 unit of glutathione, but you also lose a unit of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. In your cell, that's a unit of energy. So that's part of the problem, that the more toxins that you have to remove from your body, the more you have to keep replenishing glutathione. It falls into a category, all antitoxins like glutathiones are antioxidants, but all antioxidants are not antitoxins. An antioxidant in, say, asparagus would not have an effect on acetaldehyde. It's not that type of chemical attraction. Okay. So you wind up, the more you have to detoxify the body, the more units of energy that you wind up losing. And that's why heavy drinking, like a weekend binge or a week-long binge, will deplete your energy because the body is just trying to remove some of the toxins from the body to the point that it can't anymore. Next slide. Dr. Lieber recognized this. So he went to the nutritionists, dietitians at Mount Sinai. How can we replenish this and quicken up the process? When you're young, you have a sufficient amount, but by the time you get into your late 20s, early 30s, you're starting to deplete more and more of that. By middle age, a lot of that God-given amount is gone, and you need to replenish, and that's what Lieber took up with the nutritionists and dietitians. Next slide. And what they came up with are certain supplements. You might recognize some of them. CoQ10, CME, milk thistle. These three will help the body, help the liver detoxify itself. Recently, there was a new one that came on the market. I just started using it. Acetylcysteine is another one that helps rejuvenate the liver. You know, it's an amazing organ. You'll learn about it on the next slide. One of the problems that exist in chemistry, there's a lot of products like glutathione that chemists will try to duplicate in a lab, and they'll come out with an analog, a capsule form, whatever. Many of them just do not survive the acids in your stomach. So when you take some of these, there's no exchange of benefit because the acids just deteriorate and break it down. So Lieber realized that, and he started working on this formula to give to his patients to help them deal with the toxicity of alcohol. Next slide. So let me introduce you to the magnificence of your liver. If you hold up your hand, look at your palm, it's got the size of it. Your liver is that small. And look at all that it does for the body. Amazing organ in the body. It deals with 3 blood-related functions. You see blood glucose regulation over on the left, on the right, bottom right, deals with blood circulation and filtration. It detoxifies the body, but it also helps synthesize and store amino acids and proteins and vitamins. There is some bile drainage that results from it as well. But what the body cannot detoxify and remove gets stored in the liver. And over time, you keep storing bad things in the liver, you develop what is called a fatty liver. And it starts breaking down the total function of all these other important functions of the body. Okay?
Steve, just a heads up. 5 minutes,
5, okay. All right, thank you.
5 minutes.
All right. Okay, so next slide. Dana. Okay, we talked about the acetaldehyde, the oxidation that happens in the body. This one got blanked out. That was that lipid peroxidation. That was the lipids in your cardiovascular system that has to be dealt with as well. Next slide. Okay. All right, let's talk about antioxidants. This is my visual of how antioxidants work. If you remember Pac-Man, would consume power pellets. And there's different forms of oxidation, and you get an understanding of them. Like slow oxidation is when you have rust. Think of a rusty nail. That is very slow oxidation. It might take 10 years for a piece of metal to become rusty. Moderate oxidation, bite into an apple, put it down on the counter, walk away, and 10 minutes later, come back, the white flesh is now starting to get tawny color. But rapid oxidation, the best example of that is fire. Fire is rapid oxidation. And in healthcare, it's a very important element because when doctors are examining you, they look for inflammation. Johns Hopkins put out a magazine and did an article about it and called it the body's friendly fire. It's where when a doctor looks at you and examines you, where the inflammation is where the problem is. So they can detail their treatment to that particular element. Next. So let's talk about the difference between detoxification and oxidation, antioxidation. Where detoxification was a 1-to-1 ratio, antioxidants are multiples. One antioxidant, say a sprout of kale, will absorb multiple oxidants. And the government uses a term called ORAC that stands for oxygen radical absorption capabilities. Next slide. This pamphlet on the left is prepared by the Department of Agriculture right down in Beltsville, Maryland. It's called the Oxygen Radical Absorption Capabilities of Selected Foods. This particular one was created in 2007. The scores on the right-hand side, well, these are certain foods that are in my particular diet. I eat a lot of blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, table grapes. You can see that each one of these, imagine you can eat some blueberries and it will eliminate over 6,000 units of oxygen in your body. Go ahead.
What do you mean by table grapes?
These are table grapes.
What are table grapes? Is that just
It's a
grapes?
different species than the grapes that are used to make wine.
So
And
is it the kind like I buy in the produce
just,
section?
yeah, the ones that you find in the grocery store, they're table grapes.
Never heard them call it.
Okay.
Does it matter if they're green or red?
Red is
It does. The darker the better. Black would be ideal, but the lighter. I jump a little bit ahead because we're going to be talking about wine here in a minute. But the juice of grape is clear. So how do you get red wine? How do you get white wine? How do you get rosé wine?
Skin.
It comes from the skin. When a winemaker crushes a grape, for dark grapes, they leave the skins in contact with the juice, and the juice absorbs the color of the skin. It's in the skin that you have your polyphenols and all your hard, healthy elements. You don't have that in white wine. You can see the white wine oxidation score is 392. It's over 5,000 with Cabernet Sauvignon. So go to the next slide. Try and get as punched on here as we can. This is another book in my library. It's called The High Blood Pressure Solution by Dr. Richard Moore. And what Richard Moore was able to do in this book, he brings it down to a very elementary level, but he talks about the order of the cell. And what number is that, Trina?
That is 15 or 40.
Good.
15 out of 40.
That's okay. What he does is he describes to you what happens to the order of the cell. We're going to probably not have enough time to get into the entire part of it. That's a shame because I think this is so important to just have a basic understanding. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I don't want to research this stuff other than beyond what it is. But what he did, and you have to understand that some of this research he did started back in the 60s, before microscopes had cameras that they could take pictures. So what he did was he drew what he was seeing in the microscopes. And real quick, I wanted to try and, the problem with high blood pressure is the amount of sodium that is inside each cell in relationship with potassium. Potassium and sodium bind together, kind of group together. So this is actually the compilations of about 5 different drawings that he did, and I put them all together to get the bigger picture. Every cell in your body has an electrical charge. It's very faint, but when you consider you have trillions of them, it can be quite powerful. But anyway, the cell of the body, the membrane here, is the conduit, the electrical conduit, and it is charged by movements here in what is called the sodium-potassium pump. So let me get along a little bit. There are certain portals that you see around the cell. In this portal here will be an exchange of sodium and potassium ions. Down here is calcium and sodium ions that are exchanged. Here it's amino acids and sodium, and this is sodium and amino acids. Okay? The common denominator is sodium is trying desperately to get inside that cell. And if you allow it to happen, this membrane here begins to break down into our older years. And your cells will leak. Good things get out, bad things get in. So if the concentration of potassium inside the cell is 4 times greater than outside the cell in relationship to sodium, this is what Dr. Moore calls the K factor. You'll never have problems with coronary heart disease because the cell is strong. But you can see that all along the way, sodium is desperately trying to get inside. So in a healthy cell, there's a positive charge outside the cell, a negative charge inside the cell. Think of it as a battery in your remote control. If you put it in the wrong way, it's not going to work. You got to turn it around so the positive and the negative are opposites. So K here is the symbol for potassium. Na out here is the symbol for sodium. And according to Dr. Moore, and I believe this to be true because I've applied it by now. If this is 4 times higher than outside, you'll have healthy cells. Another element that we're going to get into next week when we start talking about glucose and insulin is down here. Glucose needs insulin to get into the cell. It can't do it on its own. So when it comes along, the cell will say, insulin is trying to get in, but if the cell does not need insulin, it's going to reject it. And that's what we call insulin resistance. And that's where diabetes starts to kick in. Here, adenosine triphosphate, think of this as a spark plug that's sparking and creating that unit of energy that fuels the body. So individually, it looks very small. Collectively, when you magnify it millions and trillions of times, it's quite powerful.
That one.
This is an updated version of that I found online. And here's where you have a lot of the sodium coming out of the cell. This is the inside of the cell. This is the outside. And here's the potassium coming in. This looks more like an electrical conduit than the original drawing. But this is the essence of the problem in the industry right now, in the grocery industry, is foods have to have a sodium count and you don't have to have potassium. So, Trina, pull this thing up on sodium population. This is a document that I pulled off the Department of Agriculture. And this is the problem that exists in the United States. It's what Kennedy's going to have to deal with. I pulled this off in 2021, October 21. These are 7 different age groups. And it's the amount of consumption of sodium compared to the recommended allowance by the FDA. And it begins for 2 years old, it goes all the way to your senior years. Every one of these male counts, every one of them, is over 90% consumption, more than the recommended guidelines. Here are the guidelines for a 2-year-old, 2,274 milligrams, where the recommendations are 1,200. This is why we have a sodium problem in the United States. This is what's causing coronary heart disease, is because every male one over here is over 90%. It's almost double. 97, 97, 97, 97. Even at your older ages, when your cardiologist is telling you, you got to cut down your sodium, how do you do that? How do you do that? So that just goes to show the importance of protein in your diet, or not protein, potassium in your diet, because if this is dominating, if this is your consumption, there's no way you can consume enough potassium to push all this stuff out into the cytoplasm. It's going to dominate the cells. The cells going to break down. You're going to have obese kids at 10 years old.